Alright guys, Dominic here for Kit Guru, and today we're doing a review of the new Corsair Dark Core RGB SE, SE standing for Special Edition. So right off the bat, as I mentioned, it's the Special Edition. We should note that this model is on sale for £95 here in the UK, but you can get the Standard Edition for £85, £10 less. And the only difference between the two is that this Special Edition here supports integrated Qi charging, but that's something we'll come on to later. So £95 in the UK, it's a fully wireless mouse from Corsair. It's their first fully wireless mouse, and you have the choice to connect it over Bluetooth, which will have a slightly higher latency, or you can use the ultra-fast 2.4 GHz connection with that dongle coming included in the box. So in terms of box contents, we'll just quickly, I've already unboxed it here, I've got everything just what comes. So first of all, a small little manual, just tell you everything you need to know about the mouse really. You get a nice braided cable, 1.8 meters long. It's actually quite a high quality cable. I had no issues with this. So this is obviously for A, charging the mouse, or B, using it as a fully wired peripheral. And then we also have the 2.4 gigahertz dongle, which is plug it into your PC over USB and away you go. There's a Type A to micro USB adapter. So the purpose of this is you can plug the little adapter into the cable, and then you can plug the dongle into here, and essentially what it does, now it gives you a bit more leeway as to where you position the receiver. So maybe you can have this cable connected into the back of your PC, loop it up, and have the dongle just sitting on your desktop. Lastly, there's also a thumb grip, a side grip rather. This is for the right hand side of the mouse, and that's something we'll touch on in just a second. But that's the box contents. We'll now dive straight into the design of the mouse. And essentially, the first thing that really struck me about the mouse is, obviously aside from the fact that it's wireless, it's quite a large ergonomic design. It's for right-handers only, and if you're the type of person who wants to know the exact dimensions of your mouse, I can give those to you. It measures 126.8 millimeters long, it's 82.9 millimeters wide, and it's 43.2 millimeters high at its highest point. It also weighs 128 grams without the cable. So 128 grams, fully wireless. That's quite a hefty mouse. It's obviously not going to be for, you know, very competitive esports gamers or people who play CSGO, but for gaming at home, sitting on your sofa, it should do the job just fine. Another interesting thing to note is this kind of dotted textured surface here. The mouse is split into various different sections. We've got split trigger main buttons here, and all of this bottom half has got this kind of dimpled texture to it. It's just meant to be a bit grippy. It feels really nice under the palm, and that texture is also on this thumb rest here. So it just gives you extra good grip. It feels really nice as well. So that's something new. I've not seen that on another Corsair mouse before. So that's good to see. Moving over to the side button layout was actually quite interesting. This central button here is actually a sniper button, so you press it, hold it in, and it will temporarily lower the DPI. But we've actually got the navigation buttons either side. I found that to be, it's interesting. I couldn't really reach the front button, the forward button. I could, however, reach the back button. So for me, that layout was not optimal, but if you've got bigger hands than mine, there's a chance you'll get on with it just fine. But personally, I prefer having the forward and back buttons right next to each other because I use those frequently in games like PUBG or CSGO, for example. Now at the top, we've got these separated primary buttons. These use on-run switches, which are rated at 50 million clicks. This button down here is actually, by default, it changes the profile of the mouse. It's not a DPI switch button because the DPI adjustment comes from here. We've got two buttons integrated into the primary left button, which is another unusual move from Corsair. In practice, I found it worked just fine. I'd have my finger resting and you could just move it over and you can easily switch DPI up or down. Elsewhere, we've also got 3-zone RGB lighting, as you can tell. We start off with the Corsair logo at the bottom, the scroll wheel at the top, and then over on the side, there's a little LED behind the sniper button, and also one small strip just here off to the side. So this whole side here counts as one zone, so it's not a 4-zone mouse. You can't configure these independently, but all 3 zones can be configured independently should you wish. Now, as I mentioned, we've got the interchangeable side grip, and this is made possible thanks to the use of magnets. This grip here just pops off, snaps on, snaps off using magnets. So you can use the other grip if you want. This one's got a slightly, not rougher, but it's not quite as, it's a slightly different texture to this one. But the primary difference is the fact that it's got a little wing, so it's designed to give you somewhere to rest your pinky or your fourth finger. Personally, I don't like that. I much prefer just having a kind of flat, gradual surface. So I stuck with the default one, but it's good to see an element of modularity. That's something we've seen before on the Corsair Glaive, for instance. Now, flipping the mouse over, on the underside we have an on-off switch, which is important. Even if you leave the mouse plugged in, you turn off your PC, but the mouse is left on, the battery life will drain. So it doesn't matter if it's on or if your PC is on or off. If you're not using the mouse, turn it off. You've also got another toggle here, which is to choose between the 2.4 GHz connection or using it over Bluetooth. And as we mentioned, the 2.4 GHz connection is obviously going to give you much faster, much lower latency time, shall we say. So that's the design. In terms of build quality, I actually only had one issue with the mouse. The rest of it feels very solid. It's nice. I like the hefty weight. It makes it feel nice and solid, nice and sturdy. But my only issue was this glossy plastic bit at the bottom here. On my sample, that was just a tiny bit loose. I can't really show it to you, but when I put my hand over the mouse, I put the palm on top of it, I can feel that panel kind of pushing in a bit. And it was just ever so slightly distracting when I'm playing games or just when I'm editing photos. Just feel it moving underneath me. I don't know, that could well just be my personal sample though, so it's just something to be aware of. So now for a quick look at the software, this is the landing page when you open Q, which is Corsair Utility Engine. That's obviously what we'll be using to control the Darkcore RGB SE. So you click the big logo for the mouse, and you can see here we've got 4 main tabs, as well as some settings up here. Starting with the tabs, you've got actions. So this is things where you can choose to create macros, or down here it gives you all the different options for what macros you can do. You can remap keys, set timers, launch applications from different button clicks. So it's essentially all your macros, all your different functions that you could program to the different mouse buttons. Then we have lighting effects. I've got it set to rainbow by default, but you can obviously see there's different options. You can do color shift, which will just, it's like a color cycle effect. There's also a color pulse, which kind of just breathes in and out. And then you've got a static color, which is self-explanatory. In terms of the DPI settings, you can obviously choose between, there's 3 different stages you can choose. I've got mine set to 400, 800 and 1600, and then you can also choose the sniper button profile. So when you press down that sniper button, it temporarily lowers the DPI. So that's all configurable here. And then lastly, there's performance. This is just a couple of questions. You can enable or disable angle snapping. You can choose the lift-off height distance, low, middle or high. And there's also enhanced point of precision, but I can't imagine many gamers are going to be using that kind of thing. And then lastly, if we just quickly flick over to the global settings, you can see there's brightness, which we can adjust, and there's also some wireless settings, so we can enable power saving mode. We can set the mouse to sleep after 15 minutes, and you can also pop a battery in the system taskbar down at the bottom. Now, moving on to performance, right off the bat I can tell you, using the 2.4 GHz dongle and the connection, that 2.4 GHz connection, the wireless performance is actually excellent. I found it to be flawless. I had no issues. The connection didn't skip out on me, it didn't jerk at times. It was really, really good. And actually, the 1 millisecond latency, I just couldn't notice it. I compared using the mouse wired, and directly after that I used it fully wirelessly with the 2.4 GHz connection. I just couldn't tell the difference. The mouse was slightly lighter without the cable, but other than that, it was just a flawless connection, and so I really have to commend Corsair. The connection was just perfect. I really couldn't fault it. The Bluetooth connection, however, is not as good. It would occasionally skip out on me, and there's also increased latency. Corsair reckons it's a minimum latency time of 7.5 milliseconds, which isn't terrible. It's just slightly noticeable if you're using it on your laptop, for example. There's just that slight delay. So I wouldn't recommend it if you've got a gaming laptop and you're connecting over Bluetooth. I wouldn't recommend gaming that way. You are going to notice the delay. It's a bit like gaming on a TV. You get that just kind of split-second delay, and it is a bit noticeable. Moving on to optical performance now. Thanks to the Pixar PMW 3367 sensor, which is a high-end PixArt sensor that has been modified by Corsair. We've seen in other mice such as the Glaive and the Scimitar Pro. Thanks to the 3367, the optical performance of this mouse is actually very, very good. Flawless, in fact, just like the 2.4 GHz connection. I noticed no unwanted acceleration, no angle snapping and no smoothing, although there are options in Q if you do want to enable some of those. I'd imagine any gamer worth his salt really isn't going to bother with those settings. So that was all using it wireless as well, so optical performance is very, very good, and we would expect that from the 3367. We've seen it before, as I mentioned. It's a quality sensor based off the 3360, so gaming, pixel perfect, tracking pixel by pixel as well, also very, very good, which makes life easy for me when I'm editing photos or editing videos to get them uploaded for you guys. So optical performance, excellent. I'm also going to touch on the actual buttons and the scroll wheels, what they feel like. The primary switches, as I mentioned, use on-one switches, and I found these to be very good. There's a nice tactility. They're not the fastest I've ever used, but they're snappy. There's good feedback to them, and overall very solid. I had no issues with pre-travel either, or post-travel for that matter. So that was all fine. The scroll wheel, however, not so keen on. It's just the rubber's a bit slippy for the start, and there's not enough tension to the actual wheel for my liking, so it's just a bit loose. There's not as the same like distinct steps as we've seen from other mice. The Razer Basilisk, for example, has that adjustable scroll wheel tension, which I really like, and the Dark Core could do with that because it's just a bit loose, and there aren't, if you're scrolling slowly, the distinct steps aren't very distinct. Now, battery life. RGB lighting obviously has a big implication for battery life, and Corsair reckons with no backlight and none of the 3-zone RGB lighting, you actually get 24 hours of use compared to only 16 with the RGB lighting enabled. In my use, I actually got just under 15 hours before the battery life actually died. That was obviously with brightness, the 3 zones on, brightness at 100%, so that's slightly below Corsair's estimate, but you know, it's not miles off, so I don't think they've really mucked up their testing. In all, is that good? It really depends. You obviously get other mice on the market which maybe use AA batteries and they can last months. This, however, is obviously a high-end gaming mouse, and you have got the RGB lighting, you've got the high-end PixArt sensor. So it's really, you're never going to get the same battery life, so it does become a bit of a trade-off. You do get lesser battery life with this, but then it's a proper gaming mouse and you can always plug it in anyway. Now, speaking of battery life and charging, we do have to mention that this is the Dark Core RGB SE, as we can see on the box. The SE, the only feature that the SE has that the standard edition does not, is Qi charging. And then to really make use of this, Corsair's brought along its own Qi charging enabled mousepad, which is the MM1000. Essentially, this is a hard surface mousepad, and its full dimensions, it measures 350mm by 260mm by 5mm. So essentially what you do is you've got one USB 3.0 port coming off the mousepad which provides power to the Qi charging spot, and you've also got one USB 2.0 for a pass-through port. Essentially, plug in the mousepad to your PC, use it as you would any other mousepad, but when you need to charge up your Dark Core, all you need to do is simply pop it on the Qi spot, which is in the top right hand corner, pop it on there, and then the mouse should flash white to let you know it started charging, and also there's a green LED on the main hub of the MM1000, and that will either blink when the mouse is charging, or it will be a solid colour, solid green, to let you know the mouse has actually finished charging. So it's a convenient way to charge the mouse if you don't want to plug it in every time. You just quickly pop it on the Qi spot and it will charge up, assuming you leave your PC on. However, it is £75. Personally, I don't use hard mouse mats, purely because I find the noise, the kind of grating sound, a bit irritating. I don't find like I get as good control either. So whether you want to pay an extra £75, bearing in mind you have to pay an extra £10 for the special edition in the first place, I'm not convinced. I'd recommend the Dark Core, purely because you don't have to bother with the Qi mousepad, and it's £10 cheaper in the first place. You could obviously buy the MM1000, and it does come with a little dongle, so you can attach a device as long as it uses a micro USB, Lightning or USB Type-C connector and still charge it. For instance, you can plug in your phone and charge it on the mousepad, but realistically, if you're going to buy a Qi enabled mousepad, you're probably going to be buying the Dark Core RGB SE. So straight away that's an extra £85 of investment, and personally I'll just go with the dark core in the first place. So wrapping up our thoughts, I think the dark core RGB SE for Corsair's first wireless mouse, it's very proficient. It's got relatively good build quality. As I say, I did have that issue with the glossy panel at the bottom pushing in slightly. It's not the end of the world, but it's slightly frustrating. However, the wireless performance is really good. The 2.4 GHz connection I had absolutely no issues with. The primary buttons are lovely. Not too keen on the scroll wheel, as I mentioned, a bit loose, and the textured surface of the rubber is actually quite slippery, not very grippy, so that could be improved in a future revision. However, if you are looking for a really good gaming mouse, wireless gaming mouse with a high-end optical sensor, the dark core RGB SE or non-SE, I would recommend going for the non-SE version, purely because that way you're paying less for the mouse in the first place, and then you don't really need to go for the £75 MM1000. But on the whole, it's a really good mouse, excellent wireless tracking, and then the optical sensor is also very proficient. So we are very happy to recommend the new Corsair Dark Core RGB SE, or even the standard model. So I'm Dominic with Kit Guru. This has been our review of the new Corsair Dark Core RGB SE. If you like this video, you can hit thumbs up, subscribe and leave a comment. We'd also love you to connect with us on our social media channels. So we're on Twitter and Facebook, and we'd love to chat with you guys over there. And I'll see you in the next video.